Hello and welcome to this slightly extended version of the interview on France 24. I'm Robert Parsons. Instead of our usual one guest today, we have three to mark the occasion of the Open Government Partnership Global Summit, which is being held in Paris this week. Membership of the partnership has increased to over 70 since its creation 5 years ago. But the challenge to democracy across the globe has rarely seemed so strong or so varied. Our guests are all in Paris to attend the summit. Yelena Panfilova is the vice chairperson of Transparency International's board of directors and the founder of its Russian chapter back in 1999. Tom Malinowski is the US Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor and former Washington Director of Human Rights Watch. And Tom King is the head of partnerships at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Thanks very much for being with us today at France 24. If I could start with you, Tom Malinowski. At the start of this summit, President Barack Obama made an address to all those attending it, and it sounded extraordinarily upbeat, mentioning the fact that the numbers have increased over a short period of time to over 70. But the truth of the matter is democracy is going through a pretty tough time. It's taking a bit of a beating, isn't it?
Well, it is, and yet the desire for democracy around the world is, I think, stronger than ever. It seems to me like almost every time we have a relatively free election in an authoritarian state, whether it's the small African country of the Gambia just a week ago, Sri Lanka a year ago, Nigeria a year ago, and people are cynical and they give up on the possibility that people power can actually confront an authoritarian regime and win, and yet it happens whenever people. Burma is another great example of this. When people are given the chance to take control of their futures through democracy, they take it. But at the same time, there is frustration, there is cynicism, there is a sense in many countries that governments, including democratic governments, are not delivering for them. And what the Open Government Partnership is about is it's a chance for governments that see themselves as open and democratic to come together, to learn from each other, and to figure out ways to deliver the most basic services that governments owe their people in a way that is free of corruption, in a way that is easy and modern and accessible for all of their citizens to be able to benefit.
But surely also very depressing when a country like Turkey, which is also part of the partnership, is no longer part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in fact, Hungary just announced it was leaving yesterday. And you know, I think that means it's an honest institution. It's an institution that has values and standards. Countries that are members of the Open Government Partnership have to live up to those values and standards. And if they don't, well, they leave. And I think that's the mark of a strong institution that has some integrity.
Tom King, looking at the world, this is a big question for you, but are you positive at the way things are developing from the point of view of transparency, openness, democracy, or are you alarmed?
I think there's a mixture of responses that we all feel, but just from a media perspective, I would say that at the moment it's a very positive time. I think that 2016 has been a year where we have demonstrated the power of collaborative non-profit media, of which OCCRP is one example. Yeah. The Panama Papers investigation showed the ability of various types of media to work together for a long period of time to develop and then publish extremely detailed investigations that had a real impact.
It's interesting that you should bring up the media, because looking at the recent US election, one of the things that struck me is how alarming the situation is with the current media, particularly with the spread of false news, the fragmentation of our main news sources, social media, and the confusion people seem to have about how to deal with the massive information that's so crowding into their lives, making us almost victims of small outlets, no responsibilities, who can just put out whatever they like.
Yes, I think that's a fair point, and it's something that we all in the media sector need to consider and look at how we can do things better. From our perspective, we have always had a very strong commitment to high quality investigative reporting, because we believe that is the best way actually to restore trust in a journalism sector that is often discredited or lacks integrity.
But I mean, the other thing, the flip side of that coin is it's not really just the media, it's the readiness of politicians to exploit the confusion in the media at the moment, to put out information which frankly is simply false, until the fact checkers catch up with it. By the time they've caught up with it, it's far too late and we're on to the next story.
Yes, and that's really a political question rather than a journalism one. I think that the political class also needs to consider its own actions and look to itself, really, in restoring the balance there.
Yelena Panfilova, I mean, you've come from Russia, big problems with democracy, transparency, corruption, and so on and so forth. Looking at what's happening in the Western world at the moment, you must feel a bit depressed.
Kind of we are not, because we were prepared to such development, because it's not only about democracy, in my opinion. It's like we have a huge clash of values right now. It's I mean, some people can even say like war of values of patriarchy, like authoritarian controlled way of doing things, and values of normal democratic approach to things. And in that sense, we saw this coming. That's why we were working together, all of us, I mean, and civil society in Russia, and transparency as a global movement. We have more than 116 chapters, and our partners like journalists and business and governments, because we saw that we talk about anti-corruption, normally, people think like we are just for catching corrupt politicians. We are not. That is cool part of our job, to catch them, but also it's about creating the institutions which go beyond 2016, 17, 18, 19. It's kind of creating the space where values and decency of people are in the center, and transparency and investigations and governmental job only assist that. And in that sense, I do believe that at a certain extent, in terms of promoting transparency, accountability, integrity, decency, unfortunately, civil society and media are a little bit ahead of the governments, because governments react slower and they have to adjust. And if that is the case, we have to take a lead.
And ahead of society as well.
Yes.
Isn't that just as big a problem?
Some society, I mean, actually, we are rooted in societies. It's not like just we are coming out of this outer space, right?
Yeah.
Societies sometimes need to hear clear message, because when the governments are talking about promises, statements, they're signing all nice documents, they are ratifying conventions against corruption for all good, against all bad, and then not delivering, that is creating cynicism.
Yeah.
That is great, because you don't fight corruption with statements and promises and no enforcement. You have to act. You have to do things, because it's easy to promise. It's easy to issue a statement, but then you have to deliver. And then society reacts positively.
I was interested, I read something that you wrote about 4 years ago, just yesterday, in fact, and it was 2012, and you were saying how you were encouraged by the positive public support for the work that you were doing for the fight against corruption. That was 2012. Are you still so encouraged by the public support in Russia for the struggle against corruption and for transparency?
Yes, actually it's growing, and the latest example, when guys did a great job publishing Panama Papers, Consortium of Investigative Journalism and OCCRP, and then there was a big bunch of documents on 9th of May, like downloaded on the website, and you need to do something about it.
Yeah.
So we just called we called it Avsharaton, because we needed people to come and to actually dig into those papers, and we thought it's going to be like 30, 40 people coming. We've got 300 people in one day notice signing in, and then when I came to support like this event, and huge thanks to everyone who helped to do that, and it was in May, I could see like people from students to double PhD academics, prominent leaders of civil society, and some babushkas who came say like, we have no clue about decoding whatsoever, but somebody needs to help you with tea. So people do support it. I mean, people see that actually it's in their hand. Of course, we had a very we have very traumatizing process with all this shrinking civil society space, and people
Yeah.
are being scared. But by showing our own actions, we re-encourage people, because if we all just would be sitting there and saying like, "Oh, we are all doomed. Democracy is falling. Shrinking." We need to act, and that is encouraging and encouraging and kind of sending proper message to the citizenship.
Tom Malinowski, if I could come back to you. There seems to be a growing distrust between citizens and government, between ordinary people and what people have been talking about in the United States, the establishment. What needs to be done to try and readdress the balance, do you think?
Well, I think, let me actually go back to your first couple of questions, because we need to understand that some of this mistrust is being deliberately promoted by the enemies of democracy.
Yeah.
Democracy has made incredible progress in the last few years. The democratic idea has made incredible progress around the world in the last few years. And we were busy celebrating it. We were not, I think, as aware as we should have been of how threatening this has been to powerful governments, powerful leaders in authoritarian states who see it as an existential threat to their ability to continue. And we have seen, particularly in the last couple of years, and I would say particularly from Russia, a very aggressive effort to push back after the Maidan Revolution, the protests in Moscow in 2011, the Arab Spring, and to start spreading misinformation, and you mentioned the fake news problem, in Europe, in the United States, and we just experienced this in our election, designed to undermine people's confidence in their institutions. Now, we do have tremendous problems in the United States. There are significant problems in the UK and in France. But I think some of the mistrust is the product of a very concerted effort to try to sow doubt and confusion. And we need to recognize that that's part of the problem. In terms of the answer, there are things that governments need to do to deliver better for their people. And this nice OGP summit is partly about talking about issues that may sound boring, like how do you make it easier for people to get driver's licenses? How do you make it easier for people to buy and sell a piece of property? You know, the very simple issues that actually are at the heart of how ordinary people interact with their governments on a day-to-day basis. In countries where there's corruption, how do we make sure that action is taken against it? And there are all kinds of fun and fascinating and creative ways that ordinary citizens and civil society groups are developing to help us do those things. But even as we do, let's not forget that democratic systems do have tremendous integrity. We are the best system of government, or at least the worst except for all of the others. And we should not fall victim to the cynicism that is being promoted by authoritarian regimes for very, very cynical and self-serving purposes.
Okay, but Tom, do you think there's a danger that we're being seduced by them, particularly in Europe, by the appeal of populist leaders and populism in general?
I'm not sure. I think that certainly in my own country, the United Kingdom, it wasn't so much to do with the popularity of the leaders that were rising up, and certainly Nigel Farage is not a popular man in the UK and in the United Kingdom overall.
Yeah.
I think that it has much more to do with some of the misinformation that has been put about. Some of it has to do with just the different responses that people have to forces like globalization, forces like changing media, the rise of social media, and all of these things are very complex.
Looking ahead to the future now, because we're running out of time, I'm afraid. Barack Obama and the United States before Barack Obama was at the forefront of the drive for democratization around the world. The United States is about to have a new president, Donald Trump, who is much more introspective, much more inclined towards protectionism. Are we going to see the United States rowing back in the promotion of democracy, transparency, and the fight against corruption over the next 4 years, or are you expecting something different? Tom, I'll put that question to you.
Well, for better or worse, I don't speak for President-elect Trump, and so we'll have to see what he decides to do. I will say that there is a long and bipartisan Republican Democratic tradition in the United States of standing up for universal values around the world. It's part of who we are as Americans, and I think we have also learned again and again the hard way through history that it's in our interest to do so. That when we have poor governance, whether it is in Syria or in Libya or in China or in Russia, inevitably problems are created that come back to haunt us in the United States.
And that, I'm afraid, is where we're going to have to stop it. Thanks very much to our guests, Juliana Panfilova, Tom King, Tom Malinowski. But don't go away, more news and headlines to come.